What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Sales Cast podcast. It's tough out there. It's 2023. Buyers are behaving differently. CFOs are slashing budget. So we need to find a new way to be able to push deals over the line and change things up. So, Jed, I don't know if you've been thinking about how to sell in today's economy.
That's all I've been thinking about. No, yeah. So, I would say even last year, booking meetings was not a problem for us at all. You know what I mean? Like that was one thing we did a really good job of, is like getting a lot of pipeline. And then I'd say towards the end of last year and beginning of this year, it's not like it's a huge problem, but it's definitely a lot tougher, right? Like we've had to adapt some things to book the right type of deals. And so, like, just for example, like one of the big things we're focusing on is kind of changing our messaging in our emails and our phone calls. So and I feel like Luke, you can relate to this as well. Like if you remember during COVID, when we're selling e-signature software to people who just went remote, and they need e-signature software, you don't have to talk about cost of inaction and all this other stuff. You just need to tell them, hey, we have e-signature software. You need e-signature software. Come buy it. And it's as easy as that. And I feel like there's going to be ups and downs in everyone's market that are kind of like that. And so the way we've kind of adapted now is we're talking more about like, what happens if you don't solve the problems that Mailshake solves, unless what are like the benefits of solving these problems. So for example, we help with email deliverability. We're talking about what happens if 70% of your emails land in the spam folder, rather than what happens if your open rate can go up to 70%. Because people don't care as much about getting their open rate up. They care more about like, what happens if I don't fix this, right? And so that's one way we've adapted our messaging. I know, Luke, you know a lot about this idea of like cost of inaction. Maybe you can talk about that. But that's been the biggest shift so far.
Yeah, another way to think of it is the negative impact of not
Yeah.
solving for it. Because, hey, deliverability is great. Getting emails read is great. But these are all positives or benefits. What happens if none of your emails are delivered? What happens when your pipeline's already struggling and you can't fill it anymore? What happens if your data is no good,
Yeah.
et cetera? Stuff like that. You start to think about, oh, what are the impacts of that not working? I can't book meetings. I can't get my pipeline. I can't close deals. I can't hit quota. The whole thing's a wreck. So that's a much more, a much better way to call attention to a solution today. Something else you were telling me about is you actually like narrow the ICP or people you're reaching out to.
Yeah, so that's a big one too. But Mailshake is still early on, and so pretty much we can sell to anybody who does outbound outreach, right? So our ICP is super wide. But the problem is we are selling a lot to SaaS, and SaaS is where all the budgets are getting cut, where the layoffs are happening. And we decided to narrow our ICP by like looking for the niche markets within our ICP that are actually still buying, still growing. So there's a few ways we've done this. We're deliberately not going after SaaS companies now because of that's where all the budgets are getting cut. We're looking specifically like going to Sales Navigator and filtering for companies that are hiring and growing, or just recently had job changes. And we're also looking at what's still coming inbound. So I've been keeping a close eye on our inbound funnel and to see like what types of companies are coming inbound, and trying to find patterns there. So like a lot in like the biotech, for example, has been coming inbound. And so we're doing a little bit more targeting there because they might not be as affected by that. So what I would encourage people listening is like, look at your inbound funnel, see what's coming, see what sort of patterns you can find. Just turn on a simple filter in your tech stack that says people that are hiring, people that are growing, go after those accounts. But yeah, that's been the biggest thing we've done so far on that end.
Yep, because if they're hiring, that means they're spending money and they need a way to get their team ramped up, and you can extrapolate the impacts of your solution not fitting them. And not Jed's solution, but you listening. What happens if they don't have this? And you have to be able to turn, I think, from what you're telling me, the positive benefits of what your solution does into a negative question.
Yeah.
And then apply that to the right types of people where you're actually getting really targeted and focused on somebody who can buy and needs to buy your solution. Am I off base there?
No, you're completely right. It's about like going from basically fishing in a lake to fishing in a smaller pond and getting more targeted in that sense. And I think everybody can do that, because if you ask somebody what's your ICP, they'll probably give you a really broad answer. And I encourage everybody to go through the exercise of getting really specific on who your ICP is. But those are two things, right? So adapting your messaging from ROI to cost of inaction, narrowing your ICP. And I think another big one that we're trying to focus on is just mastering the fundamentals and like making sure we're not skipping steps. Like now is not the time to, because you got nervous, not ask that important question on a disco call or not go for the meeting next time on a cold call. So I'll throw it to you, Luke, like just in all of your experience selling, you've sold through COVID, you've sold through ups and downs. What are some of like the fundamental things that sales reps kind of get lazy and maybe don't do when things are going well that probably today in 2023, they need to make sure they're doing?
Yeah, I think one thing might just be the mentality that you approach calls with. In the abundance age, everybody has money, everybody has budget, they are searching for solutions. You have the upper hand because you have something that's more valuable. So you're more likely to pull back, more likely to strip line, more likely to hold your pricing than today, where potentially the budgets are slashed and you're trying to sell anything you can, and you're trying to do too much for the customer. You're leaning in and you're giving them the power. That's something you can catch yourself doing, is like, hold on a second. Am I going to do all this work for you? And what am I going to get in return?
Yeah.
Nothing? Okay, hold on a second. Are you even interested? Is this something we should even pursue? Just pulling back a little bit to see how interested they are, how much of a priority this is for them. So that's one small thing on the mental side, I think, that could help out. Have you been losing deals at the end recently, or what's the closing side look like?
Yeah, we had a lot of deals that have been pushing. For example, like on a larger amount than normal. Like deals are always going to push; it just happens every now and then. But yeah, a larger amount of deals that have been just pushing at the last minute due to like CEOs shutting it down or just budgets getting changed or them not seeing it as a big enough priority. So yeah, that's definitely been a big one. And one thing that we're trying to work on for that too is like, I think something we've noticed, and Pablo on my team, he brought this up, is trying to get all the objections out on that first call. So what I mean by that is like, we'll step away from a discovery call. Everything sounds good. We have the next step set up. And then all of a sudden they ghost us or they hit us with some whatever email before a follow-up call. And so we're like Pablo, for example, he's straight up asking like, hey, what hesitations might you have? Or do you see anything that you didn't like? Or is there anything we're missing here? And like trying to pull out those objections. That's been one thing we've tried to do to keep those deals from pushing. But I don't know if you have other ideas on that.
Yeah, I think one thing might just be the budget side of this. I came across something interesting on LinkedIn, but CFOs usually don't get directly involved in purchases unless it goes over a certain budget size. So what I figured out, or what I learned, is actually FP&A guys, so the financial side, who report into the CFO. They're the ones who are actually responsible for approving budget beneath the threshold. Here's a quick example. Let's say the company can purchase up to $50,000 without having to go to CFO.
Okay.
You're the head of sales and you have a budget, but you actually need to physically get approval from somebody to spend that money inside the business. And that falls under the FP&A guy in finance. Right. So before a head of sales or anybody can make a purchase, they have to go to the FP&A guy and say, hey, I want to move money from our account into Mailshake that we're buying or into Salescast that we're buying. And if it's 45 grand, they have approval and they can say yes or no to actually releasing that money. So everybody's trying to get to the CFO today. And what do you think the CFO is going to be doing with all salespeople?
I don't know. Like if it's below the amount, they're going to say he or she.
They're going to say no to everybody.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to talk to a sales rep. I don't want to talk to this guy. I got stuff to do. Business is falling apart. And we need to make sure that we're not burning cash. So hang on a second. Let's not pitch this to the CFO. If it's under a certain threshold, it's mission critical and the head of sales needs this. Let's become best friends with the FP&A guy. Hit him up. What's going on? Is this part of your priorities for Q2? Do you realize what will happen if your business doesn't implement this? And they don't get any attention today. So if you can actually hit up the FP&A guy, who is your real economic buyer, because they're the ones who are advising the CFOs, that could be your in to actually secure budget you might not otherwise as a seller.
So that would probably save you a lot of time too, because you don't have to go to the CFO. I guess my question to you, Luke, would be, if I'm selling, let's say I had a sales, should I just be transparent and ask and say, hey, typically when I talk to their heads of sales, there's like a specific budget that they can fall under without having to go to the CFO. Do you know what that is for you, or should you be a little bit less blunt about it?
That's a potential. You have to base it off of how much your contract is, the number of
Sure.
users, etc. And you can probably be smart enough to read between the lines there.
Yeah.
But if you're like over 10K, I would say that is a safe bet. You're
Yeah.
probably going to have at least one more stakeholder involved, plus finance to be final approver.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be CFO if they're a big enough company. FP&A guys, that might be your in to actually pull the budget and get the deal across the line versus, yeah, we're pushing out. We're on a spending freeze. I don't know. You got the money. We just need to find the right person to spend it.
Yeah. And let me ask you one more question on this too. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate, but you have a deal, you're working, everything looks good. And then they push for whatever reason. They're like, oh, we got other priorities. Or they say, let's reconnect on this next quarter or next month. We'll get back to you. But everything else looked good. You know what the problem is, all that stuff. What's your approach when that happens? Like you get the email, like you thought it was going to be the closing call, let's say on Friday, and they email you today and say, hey, let's push this out. Should you, this is probably and definitely not the right answer, but reach out and say, hey, we can give you a discount. or should you say or should you try to resurface the problem? Like, no problem. Last time we spoke, XYZ was a problem. Here's what we discussed. Did anything change? Or, what's your approach to that? Because I feel like that's a problem that we've run into a lot. And we haven't really figured out the best way to solve it. And we end up just kind of being left in the dark and having to follow up every couple of weeks to see if they want to pick up the project again.
Yeah, but then you probably just keep chasing them forever and they never get back to you.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
We definitely never do the discount thing. We
certainly, yeah, that's never been an option for you. Got it. No, like at that point, you're like chasing cats and they'll never come to you. So whenever I get that reaction of, hey, we're canceling the contract review meeting or we're pushing out, instantly I think, oh, I missed something in discovery. And it might not be that I missed their pain points, or I might not have missed the benefits or the negative impacts of not implementing the solution. It might be that I didn't figure out what their budget cycle is. I didn't figure out who's actually involved. So if that email hits my inbox, first thing I'm doing is hitting the cell phone number of my champion.
Yeah.
Hey, Jed, just got your email. What changed? What's happening? Open-ended, wide open, like, help me understand what's changed here, because I thought we were aligned on this, but clearly we weren't. What did I miss? And take the blame. What did I miss? What happened that we did wrong? And hopefully it's nothing you did wrong. It's just, hey, our budget cycle is not until next quarter. Oh. Well, could you still sign a contract this quarter and then push payment out, etc.? You can figure out what the actual objection is and how to handle it if you get to the point of asking them for what that objection is. Do not reply to the email.
Yeah.
Hey, we need to move this thing out. Okay. We'll see you next quarter. Or, no, you told me this was important to you. That doesn't look good over text. Black and white, very, very firm and harsh. Trying to handle objection that way.
So just to kind of like recap what you said, it sounds more like it sounds a little bit more like it's something you didn't do, not something you didn't do before during discovery, not necessarily something that you can now do. But obviously, pick up the phone first. And then I think that's a big thing too, is asking more questions about the budget, who else is involved, that sort of thing. That's a really good point, especially the picking up the phone part, as opposed to replying over email. It sounds simple, but I know it's a hard one.
Yep. And again, you might not have done anything wrong as a salesperson, but I think a decent example is like whenever something goes wrong in a customer success or like a restaurant business setting. I think Josh Braun had a great story on this, but let's say you're a customer and you found a blender blade in your fruit bowl.
Yikes.
There's two ways that you can handle the situation as a business owner. You can freak out. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened to you. I'm so sorry. Here's coupons for like 6 free meals. We're going to make this right. And you can overreact.
Yeah.
Because only one person is going to overreact in the situation. The other way you could handle it is to be nonchalant and happens. And that makes them think that it happens all the time. And the customer is going to go ballistic. So if you as the sales rep react like, oh, what did I do wrong? What could we have done better? What needs to happen? You're taking that responsibility and offering those 6 free meals. What could we have changed? And freaking out about the situation, allowing your customer or prospect to be calmer about it, more rational, and maybe work with you towards a solution. So that's one other psychological angle you can play here.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's actually a really good point, because I've been there before where I'm like, all right, well, let's connect in 2 months then. You know what I mean? But no, that is a really good point. Yeah.
Yep. That play can work too, because then they might get worked up
and
say, hey, whoa. That's the traditional strip line.
Yeah.
Scenario of, that's fine. We'll see you in a couple months, which can work, but it depends on how in depth in the cycle you've got. And you got to be able to read the situation, but rule of thumb, always pick up the phone and call them as soon as something goes wrong or you get an email like that.
How many times do you call them until you decide to reply to that email, or do you just keep calling different people?
Depends on the situation. Usually they pick up the first time. If they don't pick up the first time, they'll pick up the second time.
Yeah.
And then I'll call them a third time, the fourth time, fifth time, sixth time, seventh time. Yeah. I'll call their buddy.
Honestly, that's a good point. Because if you think about it, right, if you like, what is your success rate when you respond to that email? It's going to be super low. It's going to be extremely low. So what 0%. Do you have to lose by just calling them 5, 6, 7 times? And then if you've really exhausted, because I'm going to be honest, I might call once or twice and then I send an email. So that's a really good point.
Actually, just on that, because we're going back to sales development, you do everything possible to up your percentage chances of booking a meeting by 1%. Yeah, 0.1%. So if we take this situation where you get a 0% win rate by responding over email versus call it a 5 or 8% win rate by them picking up the phone, let's keep taking swings on where we can actually win. You'll land a couple extra, and that can mean the difference, especially today. I hate to go back to the news feed, but on LinkedIn, I saw a corporate bro posted the percentage of reps hitting quota in 2022. It was like 86% in Q1, dropped to 65% in Q2, 34% in Q3, and then 22% in Q4 last year. You guys need to take every single percentage point advantage you can to get deals across the line and close them, especially the way things are looking today. So that, I think, should hopefully be helpful for guys as you're trying to close deals here in the tough market. Negative impacts, picking up the phone, and narrowing your ICP can hopefully help make prospecting more predictable and closing simple. We'll see you guys next week.